Welcome back to the Life in Stride podcast. This is episode 360. On this episode, we had John Davis on the podcast. John is the author of Marathon Excellence for Everyone. I would say this is the most important training book that has come out since Jack Daniel's running formula. He takes a science-based, very Canova-style approach to marathon training, breaks down how to train for marathons in the book, taper, fueling, everything you need to know about having a successful marathon is in this book. So what we did on this podcast was we went through the table of contents, picked out the things that we thought would be most valuable for the audience, and picked his brain on those things. There will probably be a part 2 because there are so many things we wanted to talk about that we didn't get to. But anyway, this is one of our top 5 most valuable episodes we've ever done. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, please leave your review, drop a comment, share with a friend. We'll catch you on the next one. SAYSKY is a community-centered premium performance brand based out of Copenhagen, Denmark. Results are important, but they also believe in enjoying the process, being with people, and having memorable experiences. The running apparel is stylish without sacrificing any technical performance. I use my SAYSKY half tights for everyday training, but also know that they are the best choice on race day when it comes to comfort, storing fueling, and performance. Whether you're a recreational or elite runner, like neutral or colorful running clothes, SaySky has options to fit your training and racing needs. New collections and limited drops are released throughout each year. Visit saysky.com and use code STRIDE15, that is STRIDE 15, for 15% off of SaySky purchases online. You're getting a Modelo NA?
Yes, and it's actually fire. It's Limoni Sal. It's
Oh, dude, those are
it's
good. I had one of those for the first time at my parents' house the other weekend. Those are super good.
it's very
Oh,
good.
I
The
got some of
NA
those.
the NA world is like expanding rapidly. Every time I go to the store, there's a new
John,
NA.
are you a NA beer drinker or beer drinker?
I
Or
have
no?
had the OG Athletic Brewing, and it's great.
Yeah.
And I guess that probably kicked off the boom, at least among athletes, I think.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if you guys remember or know, but there's this guy named Bobby Curtis. He was like a good pro marathoner back in the day. He went to my high
Oh yeah.
school, and he was the first person I ever heard say that he drinks NA beers for the carbs. And I was like, that's like such a crazy thought process, but it's not that crazy, I guess. Like there's no harm with it, right? So I don't know. But I thought that was like in 2010 or something. I heard that and I was like, that's crazy. So, but he was doing it. So yeah. So good choice, Scotty. I got some of those chilada ones in my fridge right now. Very good. But okay,
John,
Dan.
what's your go-to carb-rich meal or beverage?
Oh, I'm a pasta guy, right? Spaghetti dinner. That's my jam. That's my like pre-marathon. I have this like very calibrated like, okay, this kind of sauce and like these noodles and like it's exactly. And I have that before like the really big workouts too. So I'm like very meticulous and precise with like how I want. And I don't do that for all of my eating because I think that's not good. But like for
Mm.
that, you know, 24 hours or so before either a marathon or a really big workout, I've got like it's like
How
this brand
dialed
of
in are we
pasta
talking
noodles, this
here,
brand of sauce.
John? How
What's the
dialed in are we
brand?
like measuring
Name
stuff?
names.
Oh, okay. So it's Rouse homemade without there's a variety without of the sauce without onions and garlic because those are rich in something called FODMAPs, which can cause gastrointestinal issues in some people. I don't know if I'm one of those or not, but after I wrote that part of the book, I was like, okay, I better like, make sure I'm not that. And then there's I don't remember the exact brand of noodle, but there's some like traditional Italian style spaghetti noodles, like pretty thick. They're like white, white wheat, not whole grain. Again, to watch the fiber content. And it's those two, and like just boil the water, cook the noodles, heat up the sauce, and I like it because I can make it even if I'm like traveling. Where usually you can like get that sauce or something like it. I think the last time I traveled for a race, I actually brought the noodles with me in my carry-on. It just is like, well, like, am I gonna be able to get to a grocery store? I don't know.
Yeah, that's I know a lot of people that do that, and I've been wondering if I need to start doing that. I don't know. So funny like story. I was at Division 2 nationals in college for cross country, and they ran out of chicken at the buffet. There was like a pre-race thing with like all the teams there. And my college coach was like so worried that they were gonna undercook the chicken and like rush it out that he was like, we're storming out, like we're leaving, we're going to Olive Garden. Like I'm not risking this. And I was like,
Well,
I don't think they're gonna undercook the chicken, but
well, that's
I'm
what
fine
freaks
with
me
it.
out is the like food poisoning the night before the race from the restaurant. Like that's like that is always on my mind.
Are you gearing up for a fall race of any kind?
No, no, I've been injured for a while, so I haven't been training much. Been more
Ooh.
focused on the coaching and the writing and the science stuff.
What's the injury?
I had high hamstring tendinopathy for quite a while,
Hmm.
and then I have actually that's been feeling better, but I have some kind of secondary foot stuff going on. So hopefully we'll get back into it in the fall and see if I can take a few more cracks at the marathon. But
Yeah.
I did grandma's last year, so not this past, not recently, but year before that. That was my last big race.
Man, that hamstring tendinopathy is like really hard to get rid of for a lot of people.
Yeah, it just
People have
sticks
it
around
for
for
years.
so long. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like really, just been doing, doing the strength stuff. I'm very well accustomed with all the like latest research on like tendon rehab now, though. So that's kind of a plus.
Yeah, I've been going down the well. I have Achilles issues, and yeah, you gotta do heavy stuff a lot for sure, and like constantly progressively be loading it. So yeah, it's a
Yes.
long game for sure with the tendon stuff, unfortunately. So that's what it is. Danny, yours is feeling better though, isn't it?
Feeling a lot better. I got a strength training program going on right now, and I'm lifting once, twice max a week, and it's done wonders for my running.
Glad to hear
That'll
it.
do it. That'll do it. John, when did you like start running? Were you like a middle school, high school runner, college runner, or did you start after?
Yeah, my parents signed me up for middle school cross country, probably to keep me out of trouble, and then ran in high school cross country and track, and I was pretty slow. I think my freshman year I was like 5:40 in the mile, and
Nice.
then I got into training at like in the winter and in the summer because in Minnesota we don't have indoor track, so it's just spring track and fall cross country. So I started running a lot in the summer and the winter, and then just like kept getting better, and then I ran D3 in college down at Carleton, and then that was kind of so I kind of came up through kind of the traditional path, like high school and college, cross country, track. And so I kind of still speak that lingo. And so it's interesting to talk to people now who like got into running during COVID, or like they were, they played soccer or something else or hockey. And then they come into it directly into marathons, right? Where for me, it
Yes.
was like, okay, a mile, 2 mile, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, all kind of roughly in that order chronologically.
It's funny, I had the same like started in middle school, ran through college. Most people I ran with through those time periods got burnt out and do not run anymore or run hobby jog. Most of the people I train with, like these two guys, started like post collegiately, right? And like that's my main crew I train with now, and they're like very passionate about it. So that's like the group you want to be around. But it is funny, like especially running high school, college, people do get burnt out more often than not. And I guess I don't know, just doing structured training for a long time, I guess wears on you mentally and natural to
Yeah.
take a break after. So
Yeah. And it's not always easy to predict who will stick with it. Like there were people who were teammates of mine in college where like they were so into running. They were like, "Oh, let's run every day." They were watching like live streams from European track meets. And then after college, they just like, never ran a step again, or like ran for a little bit and then quit. And there were a few other guys. Like there was one friend of mine who I ended up later coaching. He was like a 400, 800 guy in college, ran, 20 miles a week. He would do like a big, like 4 mile long run on Saturdays. And then after college, he like got into road racing, started running like 100 miles a week and like got really good.
Wow.
And so it's just really bizarre. It's always like just surprising who ends up sticking with it and who is just like, nah, I'm done. I'm toast.
There's a noticeable difference too of those that ran at any collegiate level. It could be the lowest
Yeah.
collegiate level. And I would probably venture to say Scotty and I, like had we trained in high school, like probably could have gotten on the lowest collegiate level of runner. So like from an athletic standpoint of just ability, athletic ability is kind of this like coverall term that is not defined very well. But I would say that we're pretty on par with a lot of these people who we see on start lines today. Yet they had these 4 years of structured training in college, sometimes a grad school year too, that somehow puts them so far ahead developmentally than the latecomer to the sport who just starts off in the marathon. Why do you think that is, that those athletes are so much faster at the marathon than latecomers like me and Scotty?
I think a big part of it is that traditional pipeline of coming up through like high school and college training is basically like a super intensive 4 or 8 year block of like view to max focused work.
Yeah.
And so you like, I mean, 3,000 meters, 5,000 meters and the training for it, and like, or like 8K cross country, like that is just like slamming your aerobic system up to its limit, like every week or every other week for, 6 months out of the year, regardless of how good or bad your training is. Even like it almost like doesn't even like, not that it doesn't matter what the rest of your training is, but even if you're on like some high school team that just, went running and played Frisbee, you're still running like 18 minutes really hard over hills every single weekend for like, 8 weeks. And that just like cranks your aerobic power really high. You've gained a lot of some large percentage of like what you're, say you have some theoretical what your view to max could be, but like sort of genetic potential. You get to climb up a lot of that, and then that gives you a big like easy platform to build on. So
Yep.
you don't have to solve the problem of like I need to increase my view to max, my aerobic power for shorter events, and also become able to run the full marathon. You just need to be able to take the aerobic fitness you have and then just be able to go some large fraction of it for a really long time. And so you have a smaller set of problems you're dealing with.
Makes sense.
Their
Chris, I
ceiling's
need
really high.
PTSD.
PTSD. And I really enjoyed running all the years I ran in school. So yeah, but it's like I had some friends doing all out 200s at the track in like middle school and stuff. And those were the friends that ended up being the good like 800 meter miler, like good top end speed, because they worked on it at such like whatever coach or training program they were in middle school here in Louisville. Like they just like pretty much did all out 200s once a week, and like that, in turn they had like really good top end speed for their whole career. So I wish I was on that wave in middle school, but I was doing like 4 mile tempos and stuff more regularly. So of course I'm more of an aerobic guy, so I guess that makes sense. So I don't know how much that early on, how much that plays into your development, but would be interested to know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like sometimes people sort of as they go through adolescence, people sort of change in their like athletic configuration. When I was coaching high school, we had many cases where like, someone would seem like a long distance runner when they were in middle school, and then like suddenly they turn 17 and they just have this like unreal foot speed, almost like out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so like I have no idea like exactly what you do and how that affects like what the trajectory is, but it's super interesting when you see it.
Okay, Danny.
I was gonna kind of change the trajectory and talk about your concepts behind marathon training. Chris, did you want to add on something to that piece before I turn the ship?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about this later, but it kind of fits into right now. Like, how much do you think like talent plays into running? Because I think a lot of people, like, we coach a good amount of runners ourselves, and people are like, I don't know if I can like qualify for Boston ever. Like, I'm too far away. And I like to tell people, and I think this is true, that I think anyone can qualify for a race like Boston. I think that's attainable if you just commit to growing your aerobic base, and it doesn't really matter how gifted your top end speed is. But I'm curious, like from your opinion, like obviously at the pro level, it really does matter your genetics and stuff. But like for someone maybe like trying to qualify for like a race like Boston, like does talent and genetics matter as much as like just being able to commit to the grind of marathon training?
Yeah, I mean, like I'll take all the talent I can get, right? Like I always
Of course,
jokingly
yeah.
tell people like choose your parents carefully, but
Yeah.
I think a lot, it can be simultaneously true that like talent helps a lot. And if we're talking about really high levels of performance, like is important, but also I don't see very many people where I can say like, yeah, they really got close to what I think their base potential is. And I do quite often see people who reach levels of fitness that you would have never believed that you never ever ever believed that they would be able to reach. There's this great, I think it's maybe Zach Panning, some American pro.
Yeah.
On his Instagram, he's got like a picture of him running a cross country race in middle school. And he's this just like
Big guy.
big chubby kid running 8-minute miles, and like one day that's going to be a guy running 5-minute miles for the whole marathon. And similarly, even down at much more, we're talking about qualifying for Boston. Like, I think that in a absolute sense, it's not that fast for most people. If we're talking, and I don't even mean like compared to people who ran in college or whatever. I just mean like you can probably run 400 meters, 800 meters, a mile at that speed. It's not that hard. So the problem of like, it's a 4-minute mile is a different category, right? Where like many people just physically, like I cannot run that fast for more than like 5 seconds, right? So that's a different situation than, you want to qualify for Boston, 6:45-mile pace. Like the problem is a problem of endurance, and it's much easier to build endurance than it is to build speed. So yeah, I mean, I don't think for almost never do I look at someone, I'm like, yeah, like this person's real problem is a lack of talent. Generally, there's quite a lot you can do in training, and there are heights you can reach that you would not believe that you could reach if you had a kind of naive, talent-focused vision of what's possible.
100% agree.
Yes. I feel like that's all of us, like, here. That story, I mean, you were like, there's no way that I can run that fast one day. Like, that was me 5 years ago. I would have never fathomed running a marathon at 5:53 pace, my PR. Like, it's like, that's impossible. I couldn't run a mile that fast. And then 5 years later, it's just like you put in the work in that 5 years span, and you can do it. Yeah, I like that. I like that story. It's good.
Yeah. If anyone's listening and is doubting if they can qualify for Boston, there it is. Right there. You can do it. Just train hard. All right, Danny.
The road is definitely different for person to person. I mean,
of course, yeah.
My story is not Danny's story, is not Chris's story. It's extremely different per runner. Sometimes it takes somebody 6 months. Sometimes it takes them 15 years. So
yeah. I mentioned my freshman mile PR was 5:40. That ended up being my marathon pace now, but that took actually like 15 years to get there, something like that.
Nice. Which race is your PB at?
Technically, my PB is at the Woodlands Marathon down in Texas. So I ran like 2:29 low there, and then also ran 2:29, but a little bit slower than my PB at Grandma's. I think the Grandma's was a better race though. It was quite hot that year.
It's very hot.
So it's always hot at Grandma.
I was they just announced they're moving Twin Cities Marathon further into the fall, and I wish they would take Grandma's Marathon and move it earlier. In the spring.
Yeah, awesome.
It's like June, like 20 something. It's like really, that's why I signed up, is I was kind of like coming off the winter in like much better shape than I thought. And I was like, I got to get in a race here, and was able to get into Grandma's. But like, June 20 something is like, that's late
very
for
late.
a marathon.
It's late. And the crazy thing is you can get a 40-degree day there, but you can also get like a
and
you know,
a coin flip whether you're going to get like 40 and like a nice tailwind the whole way, or like what we got, which was like 75, sunny, humid, and not much in the way of wind helping you out either.
So the first chapter of your book is the core principles of marathon training, and the first principle is marathon fitness has physiological roots, and those are listed as VO2 max, SS max, running economy, and resilience. So the one that I haven't really like comprehended or thought of before is the SS max. Do you just like want to talk about those and how they play together?
Yeah, so steady state max, as I say it, sort of like in the full expanded form. That's what a lot of people are talking about when they say threshold or CV or some of these sort of indicators of aerobic fitness. Maximal lactate steady state, you'll hear people say that sometimes. Those are all different like experimental tools to try to get at this underlying physiological concept of steady state max. And even if you haven't, like, even though you may not have been able to wrap your head around it, when I explain it, I'm sure you'll be thinking like, oh, I know what this means, like effort wise. It is the intensity, the highest intensity, where you can maintain a metabolic steady state. So your heart rate is stable, your oxygen consumption stable, your blood lactate stable, and you're not getting progressively more fatigued very quickly.
Yeah.
So right at that speed or a little bit below it, everything's stable, and then above that speed, things are drifting towards their whatever their terminal value is. So your VO2 is rising towards VO2 max, your heart rate's rising towards your heart rate max, your blood lactate is rising up towards whatever your lactic capacity is, and all those things trend together. So either they're roughly speaking, they're all stable over time, or they're all drifting up towards some terminal value. And the way to think about steady state max is actually as if you're trying to like disaggregate marathon performance into like separate components. We often say, oh, threshold pace or CV pace or whatever. But the way to think about it is as a percentage of your VO2 max, because that allows you to say, okay, my VO2 max is this percentage of it I can maintain at a metabolic steady state. And then that amount of aerobic power output, you essentially get to multiply it by your running economy, and that gives you how fast you're running at that speed. So your so-called threshold pace is a combination of those things, both the intensity you can maintain at a steady state, and then the conversion rate of that intensity to forward motion, which is what running economy is. So one of the things that's interesting physiologically about modern elite marathoners, they don't have a VO2 max that's shockingly higher than like back in the day when 210 was an elite marathon time. And their running economy is somewhat better, but it's not like shockingly better. What's better is they can run a higher percentage of their VO2 max and maintain a steady state. And then pertinent to that resilience thing, they can also maintain a very high percentage of that steady state for a really long time without their body breaking down and deteriorating.
And is resilience like a factor of strength, or is it how well you can? What is resilience? Talk about that more.
Yeah, it's your ability to resist deterioration in the basically the other aspects of fitness. So some of it is how well your muscles resist physical damage. So we were talking about Grandma's marathon. Grandma's starts with several miles of net downhill running. And if you haven't done any hill training or you haven't done the kind of training to resist that sort of muscle damage, you are going to be in a lot of trouble later in the race because your muscles will become physically damaged. But that's not the only thing. There's also an ability to resist the buildup of some of the metabolic byproducts that happen when you're running at a high-end aerobic steady state. So I'm not talking about like lactic acid or the stuff that gets you fatigued in like 5K or a mile race. There are other biochemical components that just gradually accumulate when you're churning through aerobic energy at a really high level for a really long time. And again, people differ and depending on their training differ in terms of how affected they are by that. So like literally the ability of the muscles to contract, like the electrical signal getting to the muscle and making it contract gets modulated by some of these byproducts. So it's also resistance to that kind of fatigue. And then there's the carbohydrate aspect, of course, which is if you're, are you running out of fuel? Do you have fuel coming in? Are you having to shift to less efficient fuel sources such as fat? That's another piece of physiological resilience as well.
Speaking of carbohydrates, what is the bare minimum grams per hour someone should be taking? Because I think I like to tell people like the 75 to 100 range is like pretty, if someone's taking like 50 grams per hour, I'm usually like, we need to bump it up a little bit. But what would you say like the minimum someone should be taking to like minimize the risk of bonking in a marathon?
Yeah, I mean, I try to get people to some like workable level first and then see if we can bring it up.
Yeah.
So usually what I will start like 45 or 50 and just like make sure if someone's like, oh, I don't really feel at all, or they haven't done a marathon before. And so this is what kind of the downside of like people who came up through college, right? Like at least for me, like we never took sports drinks or gels on long runs. Like, what are you talking about?
Never.
It was like if we'd had beers the night before, that was the only carb. You just roll out of bed, put your shoes on, and go do the long run. So, and that's a disadvantage, right? So I try to get people to some workable level and then see if we can push it up. And I know like social media, like people talking like 100, 120 grams an hour.
When we're running through Norton Commons or the Pewee Valley area in Louisville, Kentucky, it's pretty easy to spot Mason Construction Home. The attention to detail, the quality, the stunning design, you can't miss it. It stands out. We aren't just saying that either. Our own co-host Scotty trusted Mason Construction to build his forever home, and he and his family couldn't be happier. Don't tell Scotty this, but we're at his house a lot because we love the home. He's all right too, though. If you live in the Louisville or Southern Indiana area and are thinking about building your forever home or doing a remodel, there is nobody else to trust with this project than Mason Construction. The link to their website is in our show notes. Click on the request information option and start the conversation about what your forever home could look like.
Yeah. My personal experience has been, it's just quite some decent fraction of people, I don't know, half of runners, it's a real challenge even to get to like 60 or 70.
Yeah.
And then if we can get there, then like I'm pretty happy. And there starts to become a trade-off where it's like, okay, well, I can try fueling more aggressively, but like if I lose 5 minutes because I have to hit the porta potties halfway through, like that's obviously that's way worse than any like marginal benefit of like 100 over 80 grams an hour. So, but there are some people where they're like, yep, got an iron stomach, can take as many gels as I want, no problem. Then yeah, sure. Like I think, I think 80, 90 is like pretty good, pretty healthy place to be. I'm still somewhat skeptical of the real benefits of these like extreme fueling rates
Extreme highs, yeah.
for specifically for road marathoners. Different situation for ultramarathon, different situation for elite cycling, even different situation for like truly elite marathoning where you have like personal bottles every 5K.
Yeah.
There's the other practical aspect is like if you're just like random person running Boston, like you are carrying that fuel with you. And it becomes when you're like, okay, I'm gonna take 10 gels in this race. Like, okay, well, where are you gonna put them, right?
Yeah.
I'm open to changing my mind if there's more research on like the very, very high fueling rates, but I just haven't seen what would be sufficient to convince me yet that I should try to get everybody to 120 or something like that.
What about extreme lows? Because I know specifically like a couple buddies who have been in the 220s or 230 marathons and taking like 20 grams an hour on average. And they just don't bonk like some specimen humans, it feels like.
Yeah, there's this really cool study from maybe like 2010 where they took television broadcast footage of elite marathons and they like bought the same water bottles that they used and they like with a stopwatch they timed on the broadcast how long were they squeezing the bottle and they calculated like okay how much fluids were they taking and like from a reasonable estimate of sports drink content. This is back before gels were common. From a reasonable estimate, how much fuel are they taking in? And it was like 15 grams an hour. It was like nothing. And the hydration too was like very low. Some people can now it's an open question. Like, are they just getting away with it, or is that actually optimal for them? My guess is that they're probably getting away with that in a way that, really optimal fueling might have taken a minute, 2 minutes off of their time. There's also one of the things about like uh, a lot of really good marathoners is like they have a build that is like a physical body build that is conducive to not running out of fuel, and I think that you can ameliorate that with fueling. The issue is basically like your for a given runner of a given running economy, their total caloric cost of running and therefore the amount of carbs they need is a function of their total body mass. But the carbs you have available in your muscles are a fraction or are a function of how much lower body muscle mass you have because it's like stored locally in the muscle. So if you're like very small but have like really long or really muscular legs and your upper body is really small, you have this like strategic advantage in a low fueling situation where you can get away with not fueling very aggressively. So I think some of it is that. And then also like there are people where like their stomach is just the limiting factor. And if like that's what we got to do, that's what we got to do. Like I think in the intro of the book, I say like at the end of the day, like you got to let go of ideology and be pragmatic here. And if the pragmatic situation is like, if I try to fuel even at 40 grams an hour, like I'm like running for the bathroom after 30 minutes, like, okay, well, like we got to do what we got to do here and figure out a fix that's going to get you through the race.
Mm.
If you had to steel man make the best case for high carb fueling, what would the argument be for high carb fueling for a marathon?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelman case is, look, like your energetic requirements are very high. You're running at a high metabolic rate. More of your energy is coming from carbohydrates the faster you go. And we know carbohydrates are a more oxygen efficient fuel than burning fat. This might sound a little confusing because people have probably heard in like health class or nutrition or whatever that fat is more energy dense than carb. What I'm saying is for a given amount of oxygen, let's say your VO2 max is 50. That means you have 50 milliliters of oxygen per minute ready per kilogram of body mass. It is more efficient by about 7% to take those 50 milliliters of oxygen and use them to burn carbs than it is to take that same amount of oxygen and use it to burn fat. And because you're limited by the amount of oxygen you have, this is why VO2 max matters, you should be just like hitting the most efficient fuel that you have as possible, as much as you can. And that means burning as many carbohydrates as you possibly can. So that's the strongest case for it. And I think also the another thing people would mention is you can do so-called gut training. You can become more able to handle very high rates of carbohydrates. So that's the case. And I think it's a really strong case. I'm like 80% on board, at least, with that.
We had blanking on his name, Ryan Ford, like Joe Klecker's teammate on Athletics Club before and after Boston. And he said that they're kind of notorious in interviews. They said they were going for like 130, 140 grams an hour. And everyone was like, that's crazy. And we asked him about that. And he said essentially they front load that. And then in the back half, they can't really get it down because they've got so much in their gut. And so it's really like a front load. And then the last like 10K, they're really not taking much or anything at all, just like maybe water. So I think when people say they do that much in a marathon, usually they can't make it last the entire way. Cause I think they train with that much too. But you don't see many people doing it the whole way.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would say is, if you're like a 3:15 marathoner and you ran that pretty evenly and you're trying to hit, 2:55 to run Boston, better fueling is not the whole ticket. Like you have a fitness situation, right? There's nothing. Maybe the most concise way to put it is like fueling allows you to express your fitness at the highest level possible, but it doesn't make you a more fit runner. You have to actually do the training. It's not just some like magical gel sports drink combination that like raises where your fitness is.
Yeah. You're not like one fueling plan away from a BQ per se. Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, and this is I worry sometimes about because fueling is something that you can like talk all day about and strategize about and like get sponsored by fueling companies and blah blah blah. Like there's nobody that's like I'm going to sponsor runners to do longer long runs, right? Like so I worry that people sometimes fixate on like that kind of thing, or they fixate on like some really technical strength routine or some like supplement thing when it's like, no, we got to take a step back and look at like the training that's setting your fitness level. That's the thing that's really like for you, right? For example, like running 5:53s for the marathon, it wasn't just like, oh, like I switched to a different sports drink, right? Like it was 95% of that was the training you did.
Right.
Yep. Go ahead, Danny.
So you have these marathon training plans in your book, and they're awesome because their names are like the tornado and the hurricane.
I was laughing at the names. I love the names.
And the hurricane is like the most elite one, and I'll admit I'm a little hurricane curious. So it's like 120 miles a week for the top end of mileage for this plan. And as we talk about, well, what's the actual 95%? I would probably even call it 99% is the training. What is different about your training plans that you don't think are traditional to marathon training?
So I think for most people, when they look at the plans, the two things or maybe three things that they will see that are like, oh, I've never done anything like that before, is going to be number one, the long fast run. So this is like runs of 15 to 20, 22 miles at 90 or 95% of marathon pace. So pretty fast. Like let's say you're a 3:05 marathoner, that's 7-minute mile pace. 95% of that is about 7:20. Or for like a 2:37 marathoner, that's 6 minute miles. That means like a whole long run at 6:18 per mile. So moving quite fast. That's substantially faster than most people would do for their long runs. So
Yeah.
that's one piece. Another piece that is most people do not do is these sort of Canova style fast 1K or 2K or 3K, either at marathon pace or about 5% faster, depending on the workout. And then a floating kilometer, still like 85 to 90% of marathon pace. So still moving pretty fast and doing that like on, off, on, off, on, off. Most people don't do.
I just did
kinds of
that this
workouts.
Yeah, I
past
was gonna
weekend.
say,
Oh, you
Chris,
did?
you
Okay.
sound familiar?
Yeah.
What was can I ask what the workout was?
Yeah, it was 22 miles total, but in the middle of it was 8 miles warm up, 8 times 1K on off. So the ons were 105% of a marathon pace, which was 3:15s, and then the offs were 3:50, so 90% of marathon pace. It was hot. It was tough. It was hot, but got it done. So, but yeah, I was gonna say, on your website there's a review from Canova, and you're just talking about like those long runs too, which I know that he's like a big fan of. So I was like, yeah, you must Canova must totally agree with your mindset on marathon, because it sounds like he would.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
awesome.
that's well, you know how those workout goes. Go then.
Yeah.
That's and it's very like having to control the pace of the recovery. Like is such a
Yeah.
weird, like unusual thing for people who
Mhm.
came up through a kind of the American style training. Steve
Indeed.
Canova, like that's like their whole the Italian like whole system is like thinking about every piece of training in terms of like some percentage and some outcome you're trying to get out of it. So it's very natural for them and their mindset. But for us, it's like, wait, what? Like to like run fast on the recovery? How am I supposed to recover?
I think for most people, like that, you're totally right that that's for the long runs, just getting out the door, maybe doing like a mile easy, then locking in for like hour 45, 2 hours at near marathon pace is something that scares a lot of people. But it's just like, we're training to run 26.2 at a pretty hard pace. So we got to do long runs that we can't go out and do that on a long run, but we can, have somewhat of a simulation where you're practicing your fueling, you're running a consistent effort for a very long time. And, that really helps the mental game too, I think, to just get used to running hard for a really long time. So yeah, that's a scary thing for a lot of people to go out there and do a long run like that. But I think it's the most important part of a marathon build to do that. So
Yeah,
had to do
and
it.
from like even like just from a training theory perspective, to the extent that you haven't done that kind of workup before, that is what you need to do. In the sense that like you need to do something. If you've run whatever 2:45 and you want to run 2:40, well, you can't just do the same training you did to run 2:45. Like you need something new in training, and quite often that new thing is long and fast, or longer and faster than you've gone before.
Yeah, which is scary, but you're right. That's you got to do it if you want to
Yeah.
improve. So, I'd love to hear you like break down the phases of the marathon build.
Yeah.
So general marathon, supportive, marathon specific. I think maybe this is like a unique setup to, again, like the more like standard American way of training. So I'd love, and I think from my understanding, fairly similar to Canova's thought process. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, could you explain that, like break down to people? I think it'd be super interesting to hear.
Yeah, the way I think about the phases of training is very informed from Canova and the broader Italian school.
Nice.
And I think the American way of thinking about it is kind of like, oh, base training is slower than race pace, and then you do race specific training, which is at race pace, then you do peaking, which is like lower volume and even higher intensity. The Italian way of thinking about it is that you have the specific training. That's the training at or around, plus or minus 5%, the speed of the race. That's the most important thing. And that's the thing you do like closest to the race. How do you become able, like we were talking about the long fast run, let's say somebody's able to go out and do 20 miles at 6:18 pace. Probably a person's ready to run 6-minute pace for the whole marathon. If they can do also some work at 6-minute pace and maybe some work at 5:42, 95, 100, 100%, 5%. The question is, okay, how do you become able to do that 20 miles at 95% of marathon pace? Well, okay, you got to support that ability using speeds that are a little bit faster and a little bit slower than that 95 to 105% range. So you get 90 and 110% there. And then, so that's marathon supportive training. It's like building the pieces you need to do the specific training. And then you can do that same game one more level below and say, okay, well, how do I build the ability to do those long and fast sessions that are specific to the race? Well, I got to build each of the components of fitness individually across the full spectrum of speeds. So I need to do some long running, but I'm going to do it easy, and I'm going to do some fast running, but I'm going to do it, shorter and in shorter repeats. And I'm going to do little like baby sized predecessors of long continuous runs. So I'm not going to do 16 miles of marathon pace. I'm going to do like 5 or 6 or 7. And you scale everything down and broaden out the base in the direction of like across speeds, as opposed to just uh, slow, easy running is my base. And
Yeah.
this is if you think about this for like 5K, it maps much more naturally onto like how someone doing like Daniel's training or classic American style training
Yeah.
would think about it. Because for 5K, so much of the supportive work is slower than 5K pace, and it kind of maps onto like threshold or CV or whatever. But what's weird about the marathon is that it is not that fast of a race. And so you have this whole window of speeds faster than marathon pace that the Italian school, Canova and friends, they say, oh yeah, no, you also need to build that faster than 5K, that faster than marathon pace. And you need to be running 10K pace and 8K pace and 5K pace, maybe even like 3K pace. But that's general because it's 5, 10, 15% faster than marathon pace. It's not specific to the race itself. So you
Yeah.
have this kind of funnel where you funnel down the speeds that you're emphasizing as you get closer to the race. And that's kind of the idea with general phase, very broad, supportive phase, more narrow, specific phase, most narrow, and most specific to the demands of the race.
So the critical velocity, like VO2 stuff, would come maybe like as you're sharpening up for the race rather than like during the block or earlier in the block, right? Is what you're saying.
So for the marathon, the like what we would call CV or V2 max pace is general because it's
So
a
it's at the
much.
beginning.
Yes, it's at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you're kind of built like we said with the high school and college training going up. Uh, a high view to max is a general ability that's helpful for the marathon, but it's not specific. What's specific is running a high percentage of view to max for a very long time. And so, well, how do you do that? Well, okay, first we got to get the view to max up. That's what the CV and view to max work is helping to do. Then we got to be able to run at a strong aerobic pace for a long time. Then we got to be able to run at marathon pace or speeds very close to it for marathon specific distances. So it's kind of it inverts the usual way of thinking about it, where like for the 5K, yes, this sort of like view to max and CV stuff is more specific. So then it goes closer to the race. Whereas for the marathon, it's less specific because it's too fast and too short. So it goes further away from the race and temporally in training, I mean.
Mhm. That's interesting. I think like that's definitely a different mindset because I think people always think like I need to sharpen up before a race, right? And do like maybe that speedier stuff. So that is like a different mindset than I would say most Americans have with training. How I was gonna ask too, like how in your book do you say to handle the taper? Like how long is the taper, and like what kind of intensity are you doing leading into the like last 2 weeks, 10 days of the race?
Yeah, I am very broadly, even not even just for the marathon, but very broadly across the fence. I'm somewhat like taper skeptical. I don't really believe in like this big like 4 week like ramp down in volume. One intuitive way to think about it for the marathon specific phase is like we're almost already doing little like miniature tapers for each of the big workouts. So like when I was talking about 20 miles at 95% of marathon pace, like you don't just do that workout and then run 10 miles the next day and then do a hard workout on Monday. You take several very easy days after that to build back up. And so the whole marathon specific phase is this pattern of like big stress, big recovery, kind of a lighter midweek workout to get ready to go again, a couple more easy days, and then another big workout on the weekend. And to the extent that people are doing workouts that are so hard that they're still wrecked 2 weeks later, like I think that's too hard of a workout to do. So I don't think you need more than like 2 weeks, maybe even 10 days of somewhat lighter training to just get to the starting line feeling good. Like I also try to talk people down from this sort of like the magical taper idea where I'm like, look, like we're not trying to get some like mystical fitness jump. I just want you to get to the starting line feeling good and ready to run the same way you would for like just a solid, long fast run or marathon pace workout. I just need you to be there. I don't need a miracle. I don't need heroics. I don't need some like taper magic. So anyways, okay, that's the philosophy of it. What does it actually look like? What I like as the last major workout is actually basically the workout you did this morning, Chris, just with a shorter warm up and cool down. I like
Nice.
8, 9, maybe 10 by 1K, 1K, touching on 3 to 5% faster than marathon pace, and then floating kind of more like 90% ish. Although for that last workout, I'm actually more interested in what the float pace is and less interested in how fast the fast Ks go. Because in the final phases of marathon training, we're getting a little into technical weeds here, but often what happens is you find that those fast Ks can't quite be as fast relative to where your marathon fitness is. Maybe you can only do like 103%, but you feel really good in the float. That's kind of the like most specific type of marathon specific events. But anyways, okay, so you do that, say 10 days before the race, maybe 2 weeks before the race if you want like a really more traditional taper. I like 10 or so days before. 3 easy days and then something kind of light-ish 6 days out from the race or so. For more advanced runners, I like something at kind of 10K-ish pace as sort of controlled CV style workout. But for lower volume runners, often that'll just be like 12 miles with a progressive finish or some pretty chill workout. And then the Wednesday before the race, just some, low volume threshold thing, 8 by 3 minutes or whatever. Nothing
Yeah.
like super fast, nothing super high volume, nothing like crazy. Just something where like you'll come off of it feeling pretty good. 2 or 3 days later, you'll be ready to like really run a good race. So that's it. That's the taper. It's nothing like super fancy or wild. But I don't. If it was like 2 more weeks of like bringing volume down and like that's where I'm like I don't like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen Emil Karas's like 2024 London. It's online, easy Google search. Hit the week before the race, he did 215K
Yeah.
of volume. So that's like what 134, 35 miles, something like that. The week before the race. And then he went on to get third place at London
place.
Run 206.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
So
I
not much
think
of a taper.
I'm even for high mileage runners, I'm even more in favor of not doing the taper because, like, let's say you've been at like 200K a week, so that's what 120 something
25,
miles
something like that, yeah.
for like 2 months, 3 months, and like okay, you're gonna drop down to like 80 miles. You're gonna just like take away this huge stimulus from your body, like
Yeah.
you are to the extent that training's been going well, like you don't want to change anything up with in terms of like um the stimulus to your body. You want to stay in that same rhythm so that you get to the race, you feel fresh, you're ready to go, and then you just run the race. Like if you're counting on like, oh, I feel it's 2 weeks after the race, I feel terrible, but like I'm just gonna like send this taper really hard. Like sometimes you do that and like you hope for the best, but like honestly, like generally, like that's not where I want to be.
On the subject of taper, do you think reduction of miles or reduction of intensity of workouts is more important? So like if you just kept your mileage the same or very close to it, but your just intensity of workout is just plummeted, you think that's more important than diving the mileage?
I think you want to maintain both to some degree. Like I don't want to crank any one dial like very aggressively.
Hmm.
It's funny, like I almost don't even care about mileage the last like 2 weeks before the race because what I'm caring about is like, are we getting those specific workouts in? Are we recovering after them? And then do we have at least some days in the week where you get back to whatever a normal easy day for you is volume wise? So maybe you do a big workout, you have one like super easy 5 mile easy day regeneration run, or maybe even just take the day off. And then, 2 or 3 days later, are we back to whatever a normal day is for you, whether that's 8 miles easy, 10 miles easy, a 12-mile, 6-mile double, if you're doing super high mileage. We just want to kind of get back to that point for a couple days a week. And then I think naturally the mileage comes down a little bit and naturally the volume of intensity comes down a little bit. That's maybe the way I would think about it. I don't think about intensity per se. I think about volume of intensity.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just introduce some new, like, I don't want to be like, okay, we're not going to do that 1K workout. We're going to do 4 by mile at 5K pace. Like, even though the volume is down, that's a really new
intensity,
and
yeah.
really high intensity. So I don't want that in that last lead into the race.
The FLOSSPOINT band is the best running prehab and rehab tool you haven't heard of. Dr. Kyle Bowling, the go-to sports chiropractor for runners in Louisville, created this band to work while you are moving, not standing still. The shear points on the band create shear across the tissue layers as you move, something standard recovery tools don't do. For example, for myself, I wrap the FLOSSPOINT band around my calf and either walk around or do calf raises for a couple minutes before and after runs. When I take it off, I feel immediate relief in my calf tightness, which has been huge for my Achilles recovery process. IT band syndrome, runner's knee, plantar fasciitis, hamstring issues, you name it, the FLOSSPOINT band needs to fit into your daily routine. Visit flosspoint.com and use LIS10 to get 10% off. Link is in the show notes. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you strategically apply volume to a training plan during a marathon build? Because it, like in this plan I'm looking at now, it's the Hurricane 120. It looks like in the marathon supportive phase, which is like the middle phase of the block, that's when the peak mileage is hitting. And so in some ways, a lot of people think about a taper as a reduction in volume when, you know, it's also a reduction in intensity in the days leading up to the race. But this kind of is a little bit counterintuitive to the training that I've done in the past, which is like you kind of peak in volume and intensity maybe 3 weeks before the race, so a little bit sooner to the race. So kind of talk about the strategic application. How are you pulling that lever of volume training?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, obviously, like, I want volume to be going up throughout training. I want to get to a healthy level that's like sufficient to provide you with the fitness you need. I mean, you might ask, like, why do you need to run 120 miles a week for the marathon? And a big part of it is, I mean, not that everybody needs to do that, but why do some people do it? A big part of it is like you need to be able to do those big marathon specific workouts. And it's a heck of a lot easier to do 20 miles at 95% of marathon pace or 16 miles at marathon pace straight through or whatever. Uh, if you're able to do whatever that is, 18 miles a day of general volume, it's just that's a really useful building block and foundation.
Mm.
Um, some of it is like you only have 18 weeks in the official plan in the book. It might look a little different if you're like, I'm doing a 6-month, like huge build.
Yeah.
In that situation, you might be up at peak volume, like even in the general phase.
Yeah.
The thing that people have a hard time wrapping their brain around is why does the volume go down somewhat in the marathon specific phase in the like 6 or so weeks before the race? The reason is what you want to do in that marathon specific phase is like take the volume and intensity of the week and concentrate it into individual sessions and then really recover well. So maybe in the marathon supportive phase, you get up to 20 miles at 90% of marathon pace. Take 2-ish easy days after that, and then you're ready to go for another workout. But in the marathon specific phase, we need that to become 95% for the same volume. Obviously, that's a harder workout. It's a bigger stress in your body. You need more recovery afterwards. So you know what you want, a big stress and then adequate recovery afterwards. Because if you, again, like I said earlier, if you do a really big workout like that, you just take one easy day and then go do some hard 400s or whatever, um, then you are making a big mistake because you're not giving your body the recovery you need. So that's marathon specific phases. If you think about the week, you're concentrating the volume and intensity into really big stimuli, and then you need the recovery afterwards. And as a consequence, the volume comes down somewhat, not a lot, maybe 15% or something like that. But it's also not as big of an importance in terms of what we focus on. So if I'm coaching someone one-on-one and they're like, "Oh man, like I really crushed that workout on the weekend, but like I'm really wrecked afterwards," we just keep the volume lower for like several days and then get back into it. I'm not that interested in like, oh, we better tack on a bunch of extra mileage to hit 80 or 100 or whatever it is we're looking for. I care about, did you hit that workout really well? And then did you recover well afterwards?
That makes sense. So like you focus more on the nailing the, big volume sessions, make those really big days. And then the rest of it's just like, let's focus on recovering so we can do it again. Yeah. In this phase. Let's Run just had Marius back in on, like all over their homepage on their pod. I'm curious, on like say the Hurricane plan, or do you think like double threshold is a key element for like sub-elite and elite marathoning? Do you think it's like a critical type of workout to have in the build, or do you think it's not something that is required for sub-elite and elite marathoning?
I mean, I don't think anybody can say it's like critical or required just looking at like how like most top marathoners and most sub-elite and elite marathoners aren't doing double threshold training. So like clearly it's not like mandatory.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it can be a useful tool, but the use of it is a little different in the marathon. And you've probably seen I got a chapter on this in the book because I do is something like the Hurricane Pan, I believe, has at least a few double threshold sessions. The use of double threshold in the marathon is different than for 5K or 10K because the whole point of double threshold is to get a lot of volume in a day of this kind of high end aerobic work in a way that isn't stressing your body's like physiological resilience mechanisms. Because like if you're a 1500 5K guy, why don't you just do 20K of threshold work in one session? Well, like because your body starts falling apart and like it really like destroys your ability to actually maintain that true steady state. The issue, and that's great for 5K and 10K and 1500 meters. The problem is for to some extent for half marathon, but for very much a large extent for the marathon, that sort of deterioration in your body at high end aerobic speeds is the specific demand of the race. And so you have to use double threshold as a general aspect of training as opposed to a specific or a supportive aspect of training if you want to use that like that periodization scheme that I talked about. So let's say you do a double threshold day of 4x2K in the morning and 8x1K in the evening, 16K of volume. Let's call it, let's say it all across the workout, it averages out to about half marathon pace. That's good general training to increase your aerobic abilities. Like you'll increase your threshold that way and your running economy get better. But for the marathon, it is much better to do a specific session, such as the one you just did today, Chris, because that was also 16K of volume. And maybe the average pace is more like, 97% of marathon pace or anything. But hey, it's still like 8K of you did the evening session and the morning session, just like you tweak the paces a little bit and you do them continuously. That same volume of quality is more specific to the marathon precisely because you do it in this uninterrupted way. So you can use double threshold marathon training two ways. The first way is in general training to build up your general fitness with like kind of traditional looking double threshold sessions. The second and more interesting way, which I believe is how Hurricane does it, is you can use it, you can leverage the fact that double threshold isn't like really stressing your body that much to get more quality in a low stress way in the middle of two big marathon workouts. So without double threshold, let's say this weekend you do some 20-mile stepwise progression working down to like from like 90 to 96% of marathon pace. Pretty tough workout. And then
That's like
next
exactly what I'm
weekend,
doing this weekend.
oh, perfect. And then next weekend, maybe you're doing, I don't know, 6x, 3K, 1K. The 3K's at marathon pace, the 1K's at 90% of marathon pace. Also, big workout. Here's the question. What are you going to do in the middle of the week that's not going to be so stressful on your body between those two workouts, but also that still lets you build or at least maintain your fitness? Now, traditionally, like the lower volume plans in Marathon Excellence, we'll do something like 8x3 minutes at kind of threshold-ish pace, or like 5-mile fast continuous run around 105% of marathon pace, or some kind of 10K pace repeats. Not a ton of volume and not a ton of difficulty. The cleverness is you can take a sort of slightly scaled down double threshold session. Maybe you do 3x2K in the morning and 6x1K in the evening. Now that's 12K of volume in a much less stressful way than it would have been to do 6x2K in the morning. So that's the kind of more advanced, sophisticated marathon specific and marathon supportive use of double threshold, where you're using the fact that it's low stress to kind of sneak in more quality in a way that your body can actually survive. But the one thing I will say pertinent to your question is just don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, I did a bunch of double threshold, therefore I'm ready to run the whole marathon.
Yeah. I mean, the long runs are definitely like the most critical part, right? In the training. Yeah. So you can't just do double T and then a bunch of easy long runs or whatever and expect it's going to go well. So, I think one thing that a lot of people would be curious to hear from you about is, there's so many different tools out there tracking different metrics, cadence, heart rate, lactate testing devices, right? What do you think, like, what metrics do you like to use when you're coaching or in your own training? Like, what are you paying most attention to? Heart rate? Are you using a lactate meter? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm still pretty pace based for most of my athletes that I work with, and part of why I'm able to do that is that I have all these tools on my apps page for like adjusting for wind, adjusting for hills, adjusting for heat, where I can kind
Nice.
of calibrate like the pace. I think it'd be different if I was working with a bunch of like ultra marathoners where like or they were doing or trail runners where like we really had to just use heart rate because there's no other
Yeah.
good solution. Um, but in terms of metrics, so obviously, like the pace of workouts is important and is the first thing I look at. I would also say I think mileage is underrated. Mileage is like quite a good metric for runners, both in terms of like the physiological load and the biomechanical load. Whereas in other sports, like in cycling, for example, or in swimming, things get a little squirrely because just knowing how far you went doesn't tell you that much. With running, there's this really nice correspondence where running economy is roughly constant across different speeds. And what that means is the energetic load, the energetic workload, like the amount of oxygen you use to burn carbs or the amount of calories you burn is basically constant. Like if you ran 10 miles hard, 10 miles easy, it's about the same total metabolic load in your body. And that means mileage is like quite a good estimate of the total like accumulated physiological load. And then the other thing I track is that I think is very important is volume of intensity at specific speed. So if we're talking about like, okay, 90%, 95, 100, 105, 110% of marathon pace, I'm always looking at, okay, in this workout category, let's say 105% of marathon pace, how much volume of quality did we do in that session? And are we progressing that over time? So to return to this workout you did today, right? That was 8K of volume at 105% plus 8K of volume at say 90%. Um, if we're trying to, and like you don't immediately want to go to 12K of volume at those speeds because that's too big of a jump. But maybe we
Yeah.
go to 9K or 10K for the next one. Or you can say we're going to take those 1Ks and we're going to do them as 2Ks instead. But I'm still going to, so it'll be 2K, 1K, 2K, 1K. But we're going to keep the whole volume of the session very close to 16K so that you're controlling the physiological and the biomechanical load on your body. Because that's the other issue for runners is like it's so much of it is an injury prevention issue in a way that it isn't for like cycling or for swimming. Like I have friends who were like swimmers in high school or who are swimmers or swim coaches now, and like you can get a 15-year-old doing 2.5 hours of swimming a day, like no problem, because there's no impact, no like heavy biomechanical loads. Whereas in running, like even an hour a day of running at 15 years old is like quite a solid volume, and some people get hurt doing it.
We were
Yeah.
talking last week on a podcast about the Norwegian cross-country skier Johannes Klæbo, and he's the guy that notoriously was like ripping 6-minute pace up a hill on skis in the 50K, and he just has this broad range of skill. He kills it in the short distance stuff, kills it in the 50K. He's just winning golds in every event. He broke down his training on the Rich Roll podcast. I don't know if you listened to that one, but he was talking about how he trains about 32 hours a week. And of course, there's a few hours of uh, running, there's more of cycling, and then most is on roller skates. Well, and cyclists train this way too, right? There are 30 something hours a week, whereas you look at the most high volume Kenyans, they're 140 miles, which is probably somewhere around, I mean, not quite to 20 if I had to
Yeah,
just
it's probably
guess.
16 hours a week, maybe.
16. So do you think that there's something missing that these other sports have? They work so much volume on the aerobic development side of their training, yet runners aren't putting in that much volume because they choose to do the thing that they like doing, which is run, instead of doing, cycling or cross training. Do you think that if runners tapered it back to like 10 or 12 hours of training a week, they could get that incremental, maybe 10 hours of cross training on top of that? They would be way more aerobically developed and be able to run faster, because I still think you're getting that resilience, like we're talking about, that leg conditioning that's specific to our sport. And then you're getting all the aerobic development on top of that. What do you think about that kind of idea? Have you read anything or looked into that at all?
So my intuition is no, that wouldn't work, and the reason is that if that would work, you would expect elite triathletes to be able to just, like, come down to running and, like, destroy everybody,
Mm.
right? So, like, there's some cases
point.
like Alex Yee, right, where he came down to running training and ran quite well in the marathon.
But he trained
Although
like
it's
a runner.
notable. Yeah, that's what's really
Yeah.
interesting, right? So, like, why clearly, if it was the case that, like, the thing to do is just do, 20 hours of cross training and 10 hours of running, he would have been like, he would have been able to run like 1:58 in the marathon, and B, he would have maintained his same or a very similar, like, um, triathlon looking training. And it's funny also because even in running, it is not the case that the people, and you had, recently you had, Canyon on to talk about ultra training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the case that the ultra runners who are doing, like, unbelievable volumes can just come down and obliterate everybody at, like, the half marathon, right? Often they can run well, in the marathon or half marathon, but, to the extent that they want to run a great road marathon, they have to do road marathon training. And I think this gets back to the, like, specificity of the training thing where, like,
Mm.
you kinda cap out, like, if you're Parker Valby and you literally can't do more than some low amount of running, it is really helpful to just, like, crank a ton of cross training to get that general aerobic base up. But things like the elliptical, swimming, cycling, they help your general aerobic fitness, and that only goes so far. For the marathon or for any sporting event, you need the specific demands of the race, and my intuition is that those really big marathon specific workouts, uh, recovering after them is just, like, really important, and because doing the specific race specific stuff is so hard in your body, you can't just go, like, ride the bike for 4 hours, the next 3 days, um, and then still actually recover. So that's kinda my case, my proof case is, like,
Yeah.
triathletes, trail runners. It's interesting to note that they still have to kinda switch to more running style training when
Yeah.
they do these specific events.
And yet those that
Interesting.
are piling on a ton of volume, Rory going from 120 to 140 miles a week for the last Boston block and running a PR, I mean, 204 or whatever. These guys are still making huge gains by adding volume, right? But it's running volume. So that is interesting still. There's something there about more volume, gets you more fit.
Yeah, I think to some degree and to some extent, there's in the book there's a sidebar about Claudio Barodelli, who of course now is more famous for coaching Sebastian Sawe to the first
Yep.
sub 2 hour marathon. But there was a stretch in like 2009, 2010 where elite performances in the men's marathon got, like, much better, and part of it was he was working on this approach where he was taking some of these more experienced, like, guys in their early mid 30s and actually bringing their volume down, but increasing the quality of the marathon specific sessions. So his logic was like, okay, volume helps when you're younger. Cranking that volume up helps because it gives you the ability to do these, like, big marathon specific workouts. But if you want to keep improving, those workouts need to get bigger, or they need to, like, be, longer, faster, whatever, higher quality. And
Mhm.
when you're older, more advanced in your career, you can't do 140 miles a week and 40 kilometers at 92% of marathon pace or so, or whatever, like, super intensive stuff they're doing. So, okay, I'm going to cut out some of that moderate intensity volume. And so these guys are only going to do like 80, 90 miles a week. And they were running like 205 on that. And so I think it's like mileage is means to an end. And for almost everybody, you want to bring your volume up. But I think you can get to a point in your running career where the thing you need to do, and this applies even to if we're just talking about people running 50 miles a week, you get to a point in your running career where the thing you need to do is to reach the higher level of those specific workouts is actually keep the easier days and the volume lower when you're doing those specific workouts, because it's like, okay, like I'm doing all this volume and like I just can't, it's like I can't recover after like trying to maintain 10 miles a day and increase the intensity and volume of this workout. Try doing a bigger workout and then really recovering afterwards. That actually works quite well for a lot of people.
That hits pretty hard. I had a good spring last year, getting up to 125, and immediately got a sacral stress fracture after the PR, and then built up to 140 naturally because I was like, oh, 125 went really well. Let's do 140. Fell flat on my face at 140, and now I've gone down to like 105, 115. But I've increased the marathon sessions, the volume of workouts, and I feel good on sessions, and I'm seeing like progress from that. So totally agree with that point. And yeah, you're hitting home with me on a lot of things. So
Yeah, I mean, this kind of gets back to how I think about periodization, where if like somebody comes to me and they say, "Hey, I've got a marathon in 2 weeks. I just ran 16 miles at 6-minute pace, and then the last weekend before that, I did 22 miles at 6:18 pace." I almost don't care what, like, they could have been like, you know, doing yoga class in between. And like, if you can do those two workouts, like, you're ready to run 237. And so, especially for, I think this even applies to like kind of base building when you're later in your career, but especially for marathon specific stuff, what you do in between in terms of volume and workouts and stuff almost just needs to be in service of like only what you need to do to be able to like produce the quality in the
Mm.
workouts. And then beyond, like for some people, yes, that's a lot of volume. For other people, like it's lowering the volume, lowering the intensity, and just being really fresh and really ready to go.
I'm curious, do you digest much running content like podcasts or like YouTube? Like I'm curious what running content you're into with how knowledgeable you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's I dig through a lot of like obscure or old stuff. Like I
Nice.
got this on my bookshelf behind me. I have this book from the legendary York High School coach Joe Newton. The book is from like 1968, and it's like written on a typewriter. I got it from a friend of mine who ran for York. It's like that kind of stuff. Like I love that. And then
You got
I'm
the
also
movie?
really like I read a lot of scientific stuff too, and so that keeps me pretty busy.
Do you got the Long Green Line, the movie?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
My
classic.
that friend of mine, he appears for like 3 seconds in like one clip.
So I
Because he
was
was like a freshman that year.
my junior year, my high school team in Louisville was we got up to like fifth in the country at one point, finished 14th at NXN, and Joe Newton was still coaching at York, and we went up to the Palatine Invite in Illinois
Mhm.
to specifically race them that season, and I was our like third or fourth guy coming in. It was close, and Joe Newton's on a golf cart yelling, and he was like, "That guy's Saint X, like catch him." I was like, me and like one of the York guys were duking it out, and I kicked him, and I was like, "Man, like Joe Newton was talking about me. It's pretty sick." So yeah, I was like, and we did beat them. We did beat them at Palatine, which was cool. So yeah, that was cool because I'd watched the movie a couple times in high school, and cool.
Yeah. So
They were
yeah,
in
I guess
about
yeah, I
weeks.
didn't I have yeah, I try to like keep up with kind of the YouTube podcast scene, but it's not always possible. There's so much stuff coming
There's a
out.
lot, yeah.
And it's like, I get my nose down in some book and then like I pop up and like, oh gosh, like I missed like missed a bunch of YouTube episodes or whatever. So
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's so much new like tech and fuel, like new lactate gels coming out from Santa Madre and stuff. Like, yeah, there's endless stuff to talk about. So I feel like the big one people listen to is like David Roche's now for like a lot of their scientific, like nerding out kind of stuff is David Roche's pod. So, and Life in Stride pod, of course.
of course, yeah, of course. My favorite running podcast.
John, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about in the block, very specifically in the block, all this phases of that. What's your opinion on what to do after a block and before a block, which kind of bleeds into after a block, depending on how quickly you race? I'm curious your opinion on that. There's like a lot you can do: rest, get right back into it, XYZ. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like, okay, you finished the marathon, you're back at your hotel room, like what's the game plan, day one? I like to differentiate the physical recovery from the psychological recovery. And like you guys know this, but like if you run a really hard marathon, it is just mentally like you're just like so spent and your like energy levels for like I'm ready to go, like, do some tough physical thing, even like 2 weeks later, are like pretty shot. So I'm gonna kind of cash this with the caveat of like, I'm assuming you come off the race and like nothing is hurting, nothing, you don't have any like injury from the race, because that does happen sometimes. It's like your foot's like really hurting, and so it's like, okay, we're just gonna not run until that's better. I actually like to get people back running, doing some running, I don't know, 3 to 5 days after, depending on how they feel. Kinda depends on how tough the race is and, like, how they're feeling coming off. But I'm not a big believer that, like, you must absolutely take 2 complete full weeks off, no questions asked. I do tell people we're gonna take 2 weeks off from training, but that doesn't mean we're taking 2 weeks off from running. I like getting people out to just, do a little bit of light, easy running, do some kinda stuff that's gonna psychologically regenerate you. So, run with your friends, run at your favorite trail or whatever. Um, Maybe do some biking or whatever. And then, okay, let's say we're 2 weeks out, you're back doing some easy running, you feel like you're ready to start doing some actual, like, substantive training again. This isn't, something that's counterintuitive for people. Most people's reaction is like, "Okay, time to ramp up the mileage, do some long runs, whatever." My reaction is no. What you just did 26 miles of marathon pace. You need to start building back up all that stuff you neglected in the last 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, which actually looks a lot more like, 5K pace, 3K pace, short hill repeats, the kinds of things that you can't really do in the lead up to the marathon because they're not marathon specific. You need to go back and start building out all of those individual foundational pieces of fitness again. And so the first couple weeks of call it introductory training actually look more like, we'll do like 10 by 1 minute fast, 1 minute jog, or like 8 by 2 minutes fast up a steep hill, or like warm up and then just 4 kilometers at 95 to 98% to 5K pace, like pretty fast, high intensity, low volume stuff that we just didn't, hill sprints, like that kind of thing, stuff we didn't touch in the last, weeks leading into the marathon.
Yep.
Then you get through that introductory training, and now it's like, okay, I've got 2 months of kind of like real fundamental training before I start my next 12-week or 18-week like marathon block. That's when you get more into like kind of, you take the general phase and you just like run it backwards. So it's a lot of building volume, a lot of high end aerobic stuff, Kenyan style progression runs, and then some stuff at 5K pace, 10K pace, CV kind of situation, some
Yeah.
long easy runs. And the other thing I try to manage during that whole period is kind of the like pace effort balance, or like kind of the psychological aspect of it, where far out from the marathon, or in those kind of early few months of getting back into things, I really don't want people looking at their watch very much, because so much of the marathon, right? Just like
Yeah.
checking those splits and like
Yeah.
really hitting. I mean, I keep coming back to this darn 1K workout, but like that workout's very psychologically demanding because you're checking like, okay, is the pace on? Is it off? Do I got to speed up, slow down? And it's just too psychologically demanding to be doing that every single workout, like in the summer when you're doing a marathon in like December, right? So that's the other piece that you want to think about in this sort of like true like base building fitness phase, is like, am I keeping the effort pace balance appropriate?
It's funny that you keep bringing up the 1K on off workout. I was watching Phil Sussman's YouTube. He works out with Camille, and they did that session before, like in his fall. He ran Amsterdam and Valencia. And there's like that meme of like someone like pointing at the TV on the couch, and I was like, that's a Canova workout. But
I recognize that.
yeah. So I was like, I thought that was funny, but it is funny. Like, I mean, he's not directly coached by Canova, but it does seem like he is kind of the man behind a lot of training, like modern day training for sure. I would say he's probably the most important like coach in modern marathoning, I would say.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Before we move on from like what I was just talking about, my question to you, how long do you suggest, and is this actually important? Because I have athletes that ask me this question all the time. Probably like top 5 most common question is like, when does the block start? When is the actual like, when does my 16-week training plan start? And kind of when I get into the like, 18 to 12 week out point, I've kind of already started that with the people like we consistently coach. But what's your opinion on that? Like, how long is the block?
Yeah, it was much easier in the book when you're like, it's
Yeah.
18 weeks and here's the plan.
Yeah.
I usually what I do is it's for people I'm coaching one-on-one, it's much more kind of like dynamic and adaptive where we'll have like I have a guy who's doing New York City Marathon and Bronx 10 mile, and he also did Utica Boilermaker. Okay, so we kind of have this like we sort of ride this like more advanced periodization scheme. But generally, what I do is like, okay, New York City Marathon, we got to have 6 weeks of marathon supportive training before that, 6 weeks of 6 weeks of specific training, 6 weeks of supportive training. Then we'll back it up from there. How much time do we have? In this particular case, we had quite a lot of training, and so we're kind of always like we're always on some kind of a plan. We're always on some kind of a block usually, but maybe what I would say in terms of like limits is like I don't like people going more than like 6 months uh, without like some sort of terminal like state. Maybe this is also like because I came up through high school and college running. So much of it is I still think in terms of like 6 month, you know, cross country and outdoor track sort of like cycles of even for marathoners,
Yeah.
right? I think you want to have some sort of like cyclicality to your training versus just like I'm going to do the magic week forever for 18 months and then I'll be mega fit and then I'll go run my best. I think people actually do better when they have discrete periodization cycles, even if they are longer, like 6 months.
Yeah.
So usually in practice, it's actually a function of like, okay, the race ends, you do your recovery and your introductory training, and then now we look ahead to what's the next thing, and then we got specific, supportive, and we kind of fill in, okay, general, and then does it make sense to kind of do like a half marathon block and then sort of transition from that right into supportive marathon training or something like that. So I don't have a great like I do exactly this protocol for everybody for this amount of time. It really depends on the person and kind of what their personal racing goals are.
I think that's part of the whole juggling act as being a coach too, coaching athletes, because people will often text me and be like, "Hey, I have a half marathon that I want to run with my brother and it's pretty fast, and then I got to build that into the plan." So it's kind of a juggling act, right? There's no exact science, but if you are truly signing up for a marathon like Chicago and you're not doing anything before it, you came in like decently fit, you'd be like, "Okay, we're going to do an 18-week block." And I would say other scenarios, right, it's going to be the juggling act. But.
Yeah, sometimes you get a really clean example like that, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, Chicago, it's on this day. We've got this much time. The tricky thing is like, let's say somebody does, like I know some of these, some of these races are like, like over a year in advance that you're doing that race, right? So you kind of have to like, okay, I know I'm doing Chicago 2027. And then like, I got to figure out what do I do in between. And that's when you got to go to like, okay, like let's do a half marathon block, then a marathon block, and then like this thing, and then we'll have the Chicago build. And you kind of have that like at least roughly sketched out.
You know what's really helpful for this is Jesse Itzler's big ass calendar.
Yeah,
I have not seen that.
Yeah. You haven't? So do you know who Jesse Itzler is?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. He sells this product. It's called a big ass calendar. It's like $30. Might be like 40. And it's basically a dry erase board, but it's a piece of paper. He gives you two markers, a blue or a red and a black. It's this massive piece of paper, like 3 feet by 4 feet probably. And I put it in my closet, tape it up there. And you can see the whole year on one piece of paper. And it's every month is a line. And it's extremely helpful to see your year, especially marathon blocks. I use it. There it is.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
I use it for marathon blocks and my employees' vacations. That's it. I found it to be helpful for those two things. Stress me out. When I see them on paper, it doesn't stress me out.
Okay, I do something kind of similar with Google Sheets where I have like I have like a 7-day. I have this like massively tall 7-column, like basically count each row is a week, and so I'll have like 40, 50 weeks where I can just like scroll down and see like, okay, and like this is this block, this is this block, this is this block, and here's the races. Often like 5 months out, we don't. I'll have like very rough sketch of like, oh, we'll do something this pace here, something this pace here. But yeah, you got to know like, okay, well, like Chicago's in October, and then like there's these other race options. Sometimes you even just put like, I know I was texting a guy yesterday about like, okay, we want to do a fast marathon in Europe in the spring of 2027. Here's like 5 options, and like kind of here's roughly when they're on, April through May, and just getting all of those on there. Yeah, it's super helpful to have some version of like a very long-term sketch of a plan that you can change quickly.
John, you got to be one of the 5 most like important guests in the running world and podcast.
Oh gosh.
Dude, like the knowledge base is unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just like blown away. So
I'll second that. We're like side texting, and like we're gonna go all night. We usually are. Our clock is like usually with like 90 minutes we cap it, but we're definitely gonna need a round 2 because we covered like not nearly anything of your book. It was really just like the marathon phases portion of it, which is all super interesting.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's funny, like there's Instagram pages with like people that have 100,000 followers that like talk about training or whatever. Dude, if you did that for like 2 months, you would it explode on socials. Like I don't know, like I think there's very few coaches in the US. Like, there's a lot of coaching out there, right? I don't know, like you know your stuff for sure. So yeah, awesome.
Well, thank you.
Excellent information, and one of our most valuable episodes for sure for listeners. So yeah, really awesome. Highly recommend. I'm going to link the book in the show notes, so if people want to buy it.
Yeah, marathonexcellence.com.
Yeah, Marathon Excellence, and it's got a Canova quote in there too. So yeah, it means business if Canova liked it. So yeah, epic. Anything else, boys, before we wrap? We'll have John on for round 2 for sure and talk about.
Yeah, we definitely need a round 2, probably a round 3 too. Unfortunately, we don't have the Joe Rogan style.
Yeah, the
5 hours.
Yeah,
honestly, we could.
Where are you located, John?
Minneapolis.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you're.
I went to graduate school in. Some of you guys are in Kentucky, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to graduate school at IU Bloomington. And so
nice.
I actually one year I almost did the Kentucky Derby half, and then at the last minute I got into the Indy Mini instead, and just ended up doing that. But yeah, I was like 2 hours from you.
Probably a better move to do the Indy Mini.
It's a great race. It's a really competitive spring half marathon.
You talking about the one that goes around the Indy 500?
Yeah, the course is you start in downtown Indianapolis, you go to the Indy 500 Speedway, you do one loop, which is like 2 miles, and then you go back out. What's crazy is because obviously they drive cars at like 200 miles an hour on it, so the surface is like millimeter perfect flat, and you notice the difference between that and like the normal, just like regular road. You actually notice like you can go significantly faster when it's just like perfectly flat.
What's your favorite marathon?
Well, I live at like the 3 mile mark of the Twin Cities Marathon. So like, I gotta say that, Grandma's Marathon's great. Let's see. Gosh, yeah, we have a lot of, I'm really fond of all the great like fall marathons in the US. Like Indy's great. Houston's that's January. It's pushing it a little bit, but I would put Houston in that category.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like other than Grandma's, we're lacking like fast spring marathons right now in the US.
I agree. Bayshore Marathon is awesome in Traverse City, Michigan.
I've heard great things about Bayshore. I don't know why more people don't do it. It's like fast course and like good time of year, and
it fills.
Cool weather.
I mean, it fills quickly. It fills in like a week. That's why more people don't do it.
Yeah, we hyped the living crap out of it after. We always have, because it's a great race, and I mean, I don't know. We've probably influenced like some people to sign up. Probably not like not thousands, but yeah. So, but it is
100, I would say.
Yeah, like you got to sign up right away to do it. So yeah, it's a great race. So I'm all about like the mid-major, like smaller races that are like really good situations to run fast versus hanging out at the start line for 2 hours before you race. So.
Yeah.
That's much
John,
better.
I'm officially doing this in January at some point to St. Paul. My sister lives in St. Paul.
Oh, you are? Cool.
And we're running together.
All right.
I'm going to have the most odd group together because we have a random amount of people that we've had on. I feel like although Dakota doesn't really live in Minnesota anymore. She doesn't train there anymore, does she?
She trains in like Arizona or Florida in the winter, I think. But
yeah, that whole group sometimes will just go down to Flagstaff for a while because that January, like I try to tell people like come visit Minnesota like May through September. That's the time to come visit. January,
unfortunately, I had January and February off of work, so we haven't visited my sister in like 3 or 4 years. So
bring your winter running gear then.
I will. I'm well aware. I've ran there. The last time we were there, it was the record cold winter. So it might have been like 7 years ago then. It was the -50 with like a -80 wind chill or something. Our flight got delayed for 6 days. It was like
too cold for the airplane to take off.
It was literally too cold to de-ice the plane.
Or de-icing like de-icer.
Like Delta was just like, yeah, we're just not flying right now. It was record cold. It was -75-degree wind chill. I remember that one day, and it was so cold. It was just like nothing worked. Nothing worked. But I will be there, and I will call you.
Okay,
we will
sweet.
run.
We'll make
Hopefully
it happen.
your hamstrings are better.
I've got 3-4 months to do it. So
get it sorted. Do some RDLs.
Good stuff, John. Thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This is a blast.
Oh yeah, dude, it was a fun one, very informative. So
for sure.
All right, Life and Stripe Pod, this would be 360 something, I think. Yeah, catch you on the next one.
Weren't we in the 360s?
Oh, maybe it's 370 something. Did we move that fast?
I don't know, bro.
I'll double check. Now it's 360 something. Yeah, 360 something.
We're the boss, anyways. All right.
Catch you on the next one. See ya.
Peace.